Hey, my name's Jerred Moon, and I'm part of a group of underground athletes you've probably never even heard of before. Most of us don't even have gym memberships. We don't have every piece of equipment known to man, nor do we have a ton of time to train. And we don't need it because we're achieving amazing things without it. We are Garage Gym Athletes, and these are our stories. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
Howdy ho.
We have a very interesting episode planned out today, different than normal. So one, we're going to be talking about Joe's most recent Colorado adventure and race. I want to hear all about it. In fact, we spoke earlier in the week, and I was like, dude, don't tell me a single thing about your race. I don't want to know about it because any questions I have, I want to ask like genuinely in front of a microphone on the podcast. So I don't even really know what he did, how he did, what happened, anything like that, other than a few Slack updates while he was there. So we're going to jump into that. We have a quick study for you guys today on mindset, and from really cool mindset of world champions specifically. It's a really cool study. And then our topic this week is not actually really a topic, but to go in with mindset. We had one of our athletes who just finished the coaching program, and he's doing EO3 programming or Garage Gym Athlete. He's following Garage Gym Athlete programming now as well. He just recently took on some really cool events, so we're going to bring him in and just talk to him a little bit about mindset and doing these really hard events, especially because we have a lot of athletes, ourselves included, doing events, doing fun stuff, and then we'll talk about Meet Yourself Saturday. I don't normally give a full rundown of what we're going to do, but it helps me a little bit stay focused when we get going. So let me start with my fact of the week, and my fact of the week kind of has a story behind it. So I am studying for another certification that I'm interested in taking. You know, I like to continually sharpen the axe on my end, new courses, learning. Like we've talked about this stuff. I just really want to learn and always be on top of my game. So I was taking a practice test. This is a few days ago, and it was a very practical question, which I like these questions, but I missed it, and so I wanted to make like some important notes here. It was basically like giving you an athlete. It's like, hey, we have this athlete. He weighs 165 pounds. He's an endurance athlete. Does about 90 minutes of activity per day. Blah blah blah. All this stuff. And then it says how many carbohydrates should he be consuming every single day. So they give you like all these parameters, his type of training, who he is, what he does, and then they say how many carbohydrates should he have each day. And in memorization or studying for the exam, they give you basically everything is gram per kilogram of body weight. So like instead of pounds, so it's like if this many grams per kilogram instead of pound, basically. But they give you the question in pounds. So it's already a shitty question because they're making you forcing you to convert pounds to kilograms because you don't have any reference material in a test. And then after that, you then have to find out which one he has, how many total grams of carbohydrates he should be doing. It's a practice test. I was lazy. I didn't feel like doing any of the calculations or whatever. So I just looked at the numbers because it was like a, for A, B, C, and D option. And I normally throw one option out right away. I'm like, This is not going to be this will not be the answer. So let me focus on the other three. And the one I threw out was the correct answer. And that was 600 to 700 grams of carbohydrates every single day.
Jesus.
And I thought that was like, because it was the max, and I thought that was kind of like the joke answer. Because all the other ones were pretty close, and I was like, I think it's, probably this one. And I still guessed higher than I would probably consume, but I still guessed high. I think I guessed like 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrate because most, there are a lot of organizations out there who recommend more carbohydrates than, it depends on your lifestyle and what kind of athlete you are, all these other things. But damn, that is a lot of carbohydrates to be consuming in a day. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. That's why I don't like taking these tests sometimes because you have to factor in all of these parameters, right? If you have a desk job and you're sitting around 23 hours of the day, you're not doing much activity, and you just exercise for 1 hour, you don't get thrown in the category of professional athlete where I'm recommending that you consume 700 grams of carbohydrates per day. I just think that they're overlooking so much by making a blanket statement like that. So my fact of the week that, long story to tie it all together, is just understanding calories and grams per macronutrient. So the macronutrients we have, and if you've been through any of our courses, materials, you know this stuff, but putting it more on the podcast might help people understand things a little bit. So every 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. Every 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. Every 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. And this is where fat gets
misnomer.
Yeah, it's misnomer and that was really like a huge reason for it. But what they're having you do there, just make sure my math is correct, is almost 3,000 calories of just carbohydrates. I don't think like when they made these calculations that the math worked out, because we got almost 3,000 grams of carbohydrate, and now if you're supposed to get any adequate amount of protein, and fat, you're looking at like a 5, 6, 7,000 calorie diet for someone who exercises 90 minutes a day. Like, this just can't be correct. The reason I'm not mentioning the test or the certification or anything like that, like there are tidbits that you can get from everything, right? So I take a lot of the good information in. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome. Learned that. This is something I don't really agree with you. I guess I'll memorize your answer for test time. But I just wanted people to understand how many grams and calories there are, and maybe just take into consideration if you're getting guidelines from somewhere else. And I'm not saying we're 100% correct. I just think that the whole person really needs to be taken into account. What are you doing each and every single day? How lean are you? What's your body fat percentage? All these things need to be taken into consideration before you just jump on to random advice. So the fact of the day is how many calories are in each gram of macronutrient. But that's it.
That would be really frustrating. Like Liz has always talked about how whenever she gets out of the military, something like nutritionist or something like that would be an interest to her. And I was just thinking, like, going back to school and taking some of these nutrition classes that are possibly out of date that I wouldn't agree with would be so frustrating. I would be like, "Hey, teacher, this is wrong. This is wrong." Like,
right.
Things with a lot of classes and certifications and stuff is that a lot of times there's so many years out of date, and like even information that doctors give out or preach or whatever, it's just hard to keep up with all the flow of information.
It's hard, man. Like, I don't even see, with how quickly information moves these days, like how you can actually create a textbook, because all these experts get around to create a textbook like this, right? They're like, like 50 different PhDs, everything else. The coordination of that alone has to take a year or more, and then another couple years for the editing, all this crap, fact checking. Now we get the book 5 years later, and you're like, oh wait, the FDA actually changed its recommendation on low carb diets like last year, and so now they're saying they're okay, which they didn't before. So it's just crazy. It's hard to keep up with information. I don't really fault them either. You can really only publish information that has like some sort of study behind it. You can't just be like, this is our opinion. So if there's no low carb study because it was seen as the devil according to the FDA and everything else, then you can't really do much with that. But
yeah, there was a professor I had in college, and this was like PR and advertising, and she would be like, "Okay, everybody who has the new textbook, hold it up," and then she'd say, "All right, this is out of date." Like, all right,
right,
thanks.
Exactly.
Because how fast information moves for that. But then, like, when it comes to medical and science stuff, they actually have to go through approval layers, and then by the time something's approved, it's like, all right, that's also out of date.
Yeah. But
that's also why we get into studies and a lot of books, because it's just them writing and reporting on what their findings and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and what we do is, to use more medical type terminologies, what we do is clinical. We're on the front lines with athletes, putting into practice the best research strategies and things that we've learned and have experience on. And then I feel like a research study published, that can come out after the fact from people like us, and I just mean strength and conditioning coaches in general. The science can catch on. If you're looking at science first and then working your way backwards, you may be working off of outdated information. But let's transition here, man. I'm going to go I'm going to update first, and then we'll get into your update because we're going to talk about Colorado and your race. So I'm going to go first. And my update kind of goes along with this carbohydrate thing. So I've been doing a lot of endurance training. I did endure for 12 weeks before hopping back on hard to kill, and now next cycle I'll go back to endure. And just so everyone knows, that's kind of my plan. Like, that's my plan for the foreseeable future is 12 weeks hopping back and forth, which means Joe will officially take the top spot for most hard to kill cycles completed by a human being. That's unfortunate, but I just really enjoying cycling, and so want to throw it in as much as I can, but not truly become a cyclist. But one thing I noticed, so we go through the fuels course, and it helps you like really calculate macronutrients for your activity specific to you. And I stopped using that information with cycling for some reason. I was using it like religiously with hard to kill, but for some reason I was like, I'm not going to do this for cycling because these events are just so much longer. It's more on par with like what we did in Spartan and what we have coming up and things like that. But I was so far off on my carbohydrate. Once I finally decided to do it, I was so far off on my carbohydrate intake, like rides. And when you run out of fuel, it's not a super obvious thing until you've experienced it a few times. Like the first few times, you might just be like, I'm tired. Like, I don't know why I'm tired. You just think it's like, obviously you're tired. You've been working hard for a while. And that's kind of the thought process you go through. But it could be a simple, like, you just need some carbohydrates in your life. Tying this into, I'm consuming now like anywhere from 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates during my ride, and then 30 before as well. So that's quite a big spike. But still, we're looking at maybe 100 carbohydrates, before and during, and then maybe a little after. I'm still nowhere close to like a 700 gram carbohydrate diet, and I'm performing just fine. But before, I was just like trying to rely on the stored up carbohydrates my body had. 30 minutes, 40 minutes into a ride, I would just be like, why does cycling suck so much at this point? I just had no power. I couldn't generate any power. And now, I just don't really run out of energy. Especially having, hard to kill things in your garage is not really any type of training where you need to consume carbohydrates during it. So I'm not accustomed to that. That's why the same reason I bonked in that Spartan race that we did is because I'm not used to having to eat something while I'm doing something. Like, that's just a weird concept to me because I'm not an endurance person. But changing that up has significantly improved my cycling performance. We talked about how I'm riding a lot faster. That was one of the changes that I made to be able to do that. So I just want to update everybody on that. And then also to fully take a plunge into the cycling world, I got a Concept 2 bike erg. Just going to throw that out there. Added it to Concept 2 family. So now I have a bike erg and a rower. I'm only one workout deep, but so far, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, how is that? Yeah, it's how hard would you say that is?
So today was my first real workout. I did. I just wanted to do a workout, so I did like a 25-minute workout, and it was repeats of 3,000 meter repeats with 1 minute rest in between. It is pretty hard. I started with where I would the damper, like where I would on a rower, like closer to like 6-ish.
Okay.
And that lasted for about 90 seconds. And was like, there's no way I could keep this up for, because 3,000 meters is like 5.5 minutes at a pretty good clip. So I immediately I ended up going all the way down to like 2 or 3. And that's for any longer duration, that's probably where I'll end up. So that's quite a bit different. And it's like the Airdyne, like your legs just get full of blood, but that doesn't necessarily happen as much when you're cycling outside. It doesn't to me, at least. Maybe just because you can't pedal at such a constant rate. You're always pedaling different rates when you're outside. That's why I like having a trainer to be able to train specific things. But man, I like it. So far, it's fun. I'll give more update as I use it a little bit more, but super smooth. I like all the data you can get, and so far, so good.
So I guess for that, the damper would be kind of your elevation climb or your incline versus
like if you moved it to
resistance
10,
in the water.
Yeah, if you moved it to 10, that would be like pedaling straight uphill. Like
standing upon the pedals and stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. because I tested it out, and so yeah, like standing up, 10 is very difficult. All right, man. That's it for me. Now I want to know. Let's hear about it, man. Let's hear about your Colorado experience. What did you do? How did you do? How did you like it? Let's just get an update on that.
So over the weekend, wife and I went to Colorado, flew into Denver, went out to we did what's called the Cirque Series race in Arapahoe Basin. So Cirque Series does these mountain races. So one of our athletes suggested they did one in Alaska. It's just these races that they do in the mountains. So there's in Colorado, Utah, Alaska, and one other mountainous state. And usually it's a hike/run. So like the actual top performers are actually running up the mountain, and then people like Liz and I are just hiking at an accelerated pace. So my race was 6.7 miles. Although my GPS told me it was like 6.9, but either way, 6.7 miles with a 1980, so just shy of 2,000 foot climb up. So you go 3.5 up, and then whatever is left down. And that wasn't so bad, except the fact that it started at over 10,000 feet elevation.
Oh, nice.
And it wasn't until we got home to be like, let's look at these other races, because there's other races like the Alaska one it's a lot longer, and the vert climb is almost double, but their starting elevation is like 4,000 feet or something. Like all of these other ones. So we picked actually the highest started race, which I did not even think about till weeks after I signed up. I was like, well, we're here now. So, and looking at the rosters so like they have, when you finish, they have a ton of different podiums and standings and times for different competitive brackets and stuff. And even looking at like all of the rosters for times, like they publish them right away. Literally everybody is from somewhere at altitude. Like everybody's from Colorado or Utah. There was one other dude that I saw that was from California. Everybody else is somewhere at altitude. So, I'm sitting I just looked at my thing now. I'm sitting at about 1,000 feet technically
that's nice.
Elevation.
That's higher than I thought it would be in San Diego.
Yeah, right? Which is kind of weird.
So how big is this race? Because if it's a lot of local people, I mean, that's typically, people don't want to travel the races most of the time anyway, but like how big, how many people?
I think it was somewhere in the 300s. Okay. I think they cap it at 5, but I think this one, just going off of bib numbers, I saw in like the mid 300s. So it's smaller, which was awesome and kind of what we liked.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the altitude. How did it affect you?
Yeah, it was brutal. When we landed in Denver's at over 5,000, which we didn't feel. Well, we stayed in Georgetown, which is at 8,000 feet elevation. So we stayed there for 24 hours, and we looked up, and 8,000 feet is right about where you start feeling decent effects of altitude. And first thing we did was eat. Then we walked around the little town, and just walking around the town, I guess with a mixture of eating, our heart rates were well above 100. We were into like just our 60% zone or so, just walking around town because of it. So yeah, I definitely felt breathing like I was having to try a lot harder to breathe, and just like, wow, that's not cool. Like I feel weird.
Did you see any of those canisters of air?
Not until like after the race, till after we left. It was like we were leaving for the airport, and I was like, oh, what the heck?
Yeah, so I went to Colorado this year as well. It was just for a family vacation, and we, very similar. I think we were at like 9,000 feet, something like that. And then we climbed up to, I don't remember what we made it up to, but 12 something. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but it was the exact same thing. I remember because you'd already signed up for this race, and I was like messaging you. I was like,
you were really close to where we were at.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. So my heart rate is like, I was just like walking up that thing, and it felt like a significant amount of effort, and so it's just funny what altitude can do to you. But I did try one of those canisters of air. Just later, I didn't have any altitude sickness or anything, so I don't know if maybe it would help, but it did feel like an absolute waste of money. So I that's what you get for buying a canister of air, right? It's supposed to be like 100% oxygen or close to it, so the science makes sense and everything, but maybe because I wasn't really feeling any effects from the altitude, and I didn't try it during exercise at all, I didn't notice any difference when I used it. So not something I'll spend money on again. But
whenever I hear canisters of air, I just think of Spaceballs and how they need air. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
It's been a long time. But,
yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, what advice would you give to people thinking about tackling something like that? Preparation, during, what you got?
I don't know if you can prepare.
You can't prepare for the altitude.
Yeah.
I mean, would you have done anything different training wise? Like, I mean, if you're going to be going up a mountain, you could start doing a shit ton of box step ups. You know, there are things that you could do to train. Like, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah, I probably should have done some more trail run, like hill trail running. We did some trails and stuff, but like I didn't do too many of them because all of the month of July, Liz was out of town. She was on her ship, so like we just didn't do any of that. So that would be good to prepare because as you're going up, you're kind of using things that you're not used to using when you're running. So the outsides of Liz's hips were really, really sore after, and I kind of felt mine too because of how you're kind of taking a wider stance going up. And as I was going up too, I was kind of trying to shift my steps a little bit. So at first my calves were getting blown up, and then I went to a bit of a wider, longer step so that I shifted it more to my glutes, which helped. But my hamstrings were lit up after. Like I was walking funny at the end of that race, which is yeah.
Damn. Yeah, I remember when I did my first Spartan Beast, my hip flexor was like inoperable by the end. Like which brings your leg forward, and I could barely do that movement by the end of it. I mean, it wasn't an actual injury or anything. It was just like exhausted. It like did not want to move anymore. But, yeah.
So starting off the race, you start off like everybody pretty much is jogging in the front because people want to separate themselves or whatever, and it's kind of like the more slightly level part and gravel. We only lasted running for about 3.5 to 4 minutes, and then the rest of that was just hiking. Liz struggled in the beginning, and then
what was the total time?
So our time, we crossed at about an hour and 45 minutes.
And went a little bit slower. Of that, only 3 minutes of it was running? Is that what you said?
3.5, yeah. Of that, only.
I love it.
Yeah. So it was a 3.5 minute run.
We're going to run up this hill, yeah.
And then I'm just going to run to the trail, and then when the trail starts, I'm just going to walk.
Nice. That's awesome.
But as we were going through, because of how steep it was, we were constantly monitoring our heart rate. So we were teetering on 80% of our max heart rate for basically the entire time. So that's a pretty long time to be at 80% of max heart rate. Yeah, dude. At least in my experience.
You throw anything vertical, like whether you're on a treadmill with an incline or you're going, hiking up something, whatever, running hill runs, like that is some of the most metabolically demanding work you can do. Whether you're walking, hiking, jogging, running, it's intense stuff.
Yeah. So on top of the altitude and all that stuff, another a mental factor that happened was as the race started, it started to rain. And it's like mid-50s temperature, and it was miserable.
That's awesome.
It was terrible, yeah. So once we got up to about 1,200 or 1,300 foot of the climbs, we had about 700 to go. That's when I really started to hit my wall, big time. It got a little bit steeper. I slowed down some, and then the rain picked up. And because you're getting toward the top of the mountain, it gets even breezier. So literally our hands and arms were numb going up, like pins and needles. And that was just I'm so done with this.
Dude, do you think it was a fuel problem?
So I wasn't sure. So they had 3 aid stations, and everybody seems to stop because there's only 3 of them. But Liz and I didn't stop at any of them, even for water or anything. So hydration, yeah,
screw that.
Yeah, I think hydration we were completely fine. And then in the past, I've talked about how people ultramarathon and those runners, they barely hydrate during and they finish dehydrated. And I was like, well, I think we're pretty good as far as hydration goes. So I think we're fine there. And I thought about fuel. So there was one halfway up, and I think my fuel was just fine then, and I had something in my pocket. I probably should have taken it when I started to really hit my wall. I wasn't sure which factor it was, whether it was just general fatigue that I was feeling from going up the mountain, or if I actually needed to refuel. But I decided to just not do it. Liz didn't do it, so I was like, yeah, whatever. I'll just tough it out and see what happens. And it was pretty raw. I think it was just a lot of things were sucking, but also just normal fatigue.
Yeah.
So I did it without any fuel, so it wasn't too bad. But I think if I would have, probably about the 45 to 50 minute mark was when I could have used something, a little boost. They had these like honey and electrolyte packets that were really, really good that I had like at the finish line because, I needed to get fueled then.
Well, damn. I think, dude, when we do this, well, for people who don't know, because, we should have thrown in the announcements at the beginning, but we're doing some events. You can go to garagegymathlete.com/events and check out all the things that we have going on. You can actually join us for any event that you want. We're doing a couple this year, so feel free if you want to join us or run with us or whatever we're doing. But, dude, when we hit up the Beast in North Carolina in November, I will be like, I'm basically be eating the whole time. I'm like be consuming carbohydrates and other junk throughout. I'll try and bring some for not everybody, but I'll have a little extra. No, I'm not. The reason I say not everybody is because I can't be a pack mule the whole time. But I'll bring something for people because I know it's going to happen to somebody. They're going to be like, they didn't listen to the podcast. They don't know what's going on. I'm like, yeah, it's 13 miles. You're going to run out of energy about here. Here you go. So. Yeah,
I had salt tabs on our last race. But Cirque Series overall, I think it was an awesome time, awesome experience. They actually have like a little, like most of those events have a little base camp, and with all kinds of vendors and cool stuff there. So that was really awesome. All the people were really great. And then afterwards, pretty much everybody just hangs out. So in the Spartan ones, the one that I did, nobody really wants to hang out after because you're covered in mud and then you're walking around in even more mud, and you're kind of just over the whole mud experience and everything. You're just like, I'm just done with this. I just want to go shower and leave.
Yeah.
But for this, we got to the finish and we were like, all right, we're going to go change and then come back. And, because they had some food and beer vendors. So we came back and had some food, had some beer. And then they did their podium thing, which is cool. But they gave away a ton of stuff and like awesome prizes. And all you had to do was just hang out with your bib number and you got them. So like Yeti cooler, they gave away skis, they gave away Lululemon stuff, like all kinds of awesome things. So overall experience was really, really awesome. The altitude made it suck, but it was definitely worth it. We would possibly do it again, just maybe not at as high of an altitude. Yeah,
sounds fun, man. I think I'd be interested in doing one for sure.
We'll never be competitive in it because like the top competitive people they're like cross country runners and trail runners, the people that are visually like that's what they do. They do this as like a training tool to their ultra marathon stuff, and we're just like, nah, I'll just finish and have a good time.
That's kind of how every event. There's always going to be like, if you're not training hours per day for something, you're not going to be competitive, right? And there's always going to be that super competitive person who gets in there.
Yeah, great time, no mud.
All right, man. Well, then let's get into the study real quick, and this one will be quick because we also have an interview for you guys, and this one actually is the interview kind of coincides. I mean, the interview with Marco that's coming up coincides kind of with his study just about mindset in general. So we'll cover it relatively fast. If you guys want to dive into it further, you can. There's a lot of offshoots that you could do more research on, but the study reviewed, and this is in the show notes if you want to check it out, is Lifestyles and Mindsets of Olympic, Paralympic, and World Champions is an integrated approach, the key to elite performance. So that is the study's name. It's by Burns. It was published in 2018. And so last week I gave this fact of the week about how VO2 max is the real predictor of cardiorespiratory fitness and performance, but they always like to point out that is just because you have a high VO2 max doesn't mean you're going to win squat. Like, there's such a mental side to competition and grit and everything that people can win a race or be the best athlete for a bunch of other reasons. And this really pointed that out. They looked at, so they basically interviewed these people. And before I go any further, I just want to talk about this kind of research. There's qualitative and quantitative, right? So qualitative is more what this study is, and quantitative is like, what can I count? What's the data? What can we measure? Mm-hmm. Like the grounding pad we talked about last week, the very quantitative in nature. These qualitative ones, and they wanted to point out also in the literature that these qualitative ones lead towards quantitative research later. And so that's why they're important to do. Because if they find like a particular recurring element in a elite champion, they might be able to then pinpoint that down to a habit and then look at consistency of that and be able to measure different things. And so that's why these studies they feel a little less sciencey, because they're basically interviews with world champions, and they're not like this direct data driven thing. It's also why us going over it's going to be pretty fast. But a few things I want to point out. So they, like I said, they were 10 Olympic, Paralympic world champions, gold medalists, and they were interviewed about what they believed contributed to their competitive success. And one thing I wanted to point out right off the bat I thought was really interesting is not a single one mentioned anything that had to do with their physical capacity or genetics or anything like that. They all referred to psychological aspects. And I find that very interesting. I don't know if that had to do with the way the questions were asked or whatever, but I thought it was interesting that none of them talked about any of their physical capacity. And I mentioned to you previously, like, okay, well, maybe they didn't mention that stuff because it's a given. They're like, I'm a professional athlete. Of course, there's, physical stuff. And it's not that they negated like what was in there. It just wasn't the main thing that they talked about when they were specifically asked, like, why were you successful? When they dive into the interview responses a little bit more, they do talk about, following the latest stuff on sports science and, recovery strategies and programming and working with a coach. And they do mention all of those things, having large parts of helping them out. But when we're getting more into the mindset things, and they just generally asked, why are you successful? They start, spouting off all these psychological principles and not, it's because I figured out how to double my HRV. Like, that's not the kind of stuff that they're worried about, right? Now, the main takeaway and what I wanted to really get to, the meat of it. So they obviously, they interview these world champions. They're talking about how mindset is super important. And now we get into the themes. So they had 4 main themes that they pulled out from all these elite performers. And this is kind of what I want to be takeaways for the Garage Gym athletes, because you can just start, this could be your checklist, or you can try diving down into more of these things. It's table 3 in the study if you were to actually read the full study. Like I said, we have a link to it in the show notes. But theme 1 was psychological attributes, and they were superior self-regulation, intrinsic motivation, so your why or your motivation being something internal, not something external, not weight on the scale or weight on the barbell, anything like that, more intrinsic. Effective visualization and imagery strategies, which we've talked about a little bit on this podcast, also very cool. Reliance on faith, routines, or rituals. Strong work ethic, self-confidence and dominance, which I find very interesting. And effective coping strategies and positive mindset. So those were all of the psychological attributes. Any of those stick out to you? Anything you want to mention on any of them?
Your self-confidence and dominance, when your reaction a little bit. I think if you are confident that you can do whatever you're training for, and if you feel good about how your training progress is going versus finding yourself in a hole, like if you don't see the results as fast as you want, that's when like program hopping and stuff like that comes along. But if people are actually confident in what they're doing and saying, okay, yeah, this is all of this work is going to pay off, then I think that's how that one could play out.
Yeah, and I also think that all of these apply to whatever you're trying to do in life. Like if you want to be, an elite business owner or parent or husband or whatever it is, like all of these are obviously going to apply. I really think it's just traits of a high performer. Now, the second theme, they were performance strategies, and it was maximizing training and performance opportunities. So I'm guessing when they had the opportunity to train, really just making the most of that, right? Like not just, and we've had this discussion a lot on Garage Gym Athlete Seasons. There's a big difference between doing the work and checking a box and doing the work to the best of your ability. And that doesn't mean at the highest intensity. It just means like if I say for quality on a rep, like are you sitting there and doing it to the best possible quality that you could possibly imagine? then that there's a big difference there. The second one was effective utilization of sports science, so keeping up with that research and staying up to date and utilizing the stuff. That's a lot of like, pulling tools out of the Garage Gym Athlete podcast and utilizing this stuff. Get a grounding mat, get a chili pad, whatever you can do. Focus on the EO3 elements. And then the last one under performance strategies was physical therapies and recovery. Very, very, very important.
Taking care of your body, listening to it.
Yeah. Anything on those?
No.
Okay. The third theme was interpersonal relationships. So I find these very, very interesting. So having the right support team was the first one, and the second one was the athlete-coach partnership. So I just think that this interpersonal relationships in general are often way overlooked when we're talking about athletic performance. But I know this 100% to be true. I know if I am having a fight with my wife, even the smallest one, I can't work as well. I don't train as well, like nothing. So like that's why if we ever do get into a fight, I have to like try and fix it immediately because I can't have that like in the back of my head. And so if you had something like that ongoing, it's obviously going to affect your performance, right? Like if you had like a bad relationship or a negative person in your life or something just not going well, that zaps you and drains you way more than you think that it does.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like friends and groups like that. Like they ask you to do something on Saturdays. Like, sorry, I got to go train for 3 hours. Like, oh man, why you got to do that? You train all the time, but like it doesn't really match up with their goals. Yeah,
people giving you crap for trying to be better. I always give that example of like if you're in a workplace, like a pretty open workplace, and you bring in McDonald's, people won't say shit. They won't be like,
yeah,
are you seriously going to eat that right now? But you bring in chicken and broccoli, and they're going to be like, oh, Mr. Healthy, you trying to eat healthy with this healthy little lunch you brought from home. Like, I'm like, is this seriously what we're doing right now? I had that happen to me. And, when I used to have a more work with people in a real place job, and now I don't. But
military?
Yeah, the military, where the diets aren't that great.
Yeah. Which segue, lifestyle practices.
Yeah, which is theme 4. Lifestyle practices was nutrition and hydration, obviously very important. Utilization of complementary therapies and importance of time out. So I think the time out was like time off and unplugging, meditation practices are mentioned in here.
Down regulation.
Yeah, down regulation, all those things. So I feel like we have covered a lot of those in EO3 elements, making sure that those things are in there. We don't take care of a lot of the psychological, but that's hard to kind of do. Like the intrinsic motivation, one offshoot, if you want to study, and I've studied it a lot, is the self-determination theory. It's an entire self-determination theory. It is an entire body of research that you could dive into and find out how people achieve things and how they do that, remain determined and all those things. So that's really cool, but those are also very important. Let me scroll through my notes, see if there's anything else I have. That's pretty much it, man. That was the main. You have any takeaways other than that?
The only thing I was thinking of is I think that they all went to the psychological and those aspects versus the physical and they kind of mentioned that initially to be those high-level athletes, there's some sort of genetic factor to initially get started, but then after that, it's all psychological. It's all in their brain. That's probably why they went toward that, because they know the thousands and thousands of hours of work that they put in to get to where they're at versus just being gifted with the skill that they have. Like, yeah, I had some skills early on, but working hard is really what got me to here.
Yeah, like, because if we were both competing at the Olympic level and you got first place and I got second place, our training is probably pretty damn close to the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe we had some different strategies or techniques or whatever, but we both put in the time, the effort, the energy. So, and then if they're like, hey, Joe, how did you beat Jerred and, get first over second? And you're not going to be like, you know what? I started stretching my calves every day at the end of the day. You're gonna be like, no, I had more grit, or I did this psychological thing, or, I had a different mindset. Something like that will come up, which I think is just a really good point. But also shouldn't be overlooked, guys, if you're not taking care of the interpersonal stuff for focusing on those things, maybe start that whole person concept is my bigger takeaway, making sure that you're really well-rounded, happy home life, and less stress, and hydration, nutrition, fitness, all these things, they all fit and work together.
Yeah.
All right, that's that study. Now let's we're going to bring Marco on. So we'll have Marco on to kind of talk about some of this mindset stuff too that he just went through, and then we will finish out with the workout. So let's bring him on. All right, Marco, what's up, man? You got me?
How you doing, Jerred?
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we are here today, a little bit different than interviews we've done in the past. Normally we interview athletes and then we drop a season. But we wanted to bring Marco on kind of like as an experiment episode, but he's also doing some really cool stuff that we want to talk about, so that was a big part of wanting to bring him on. So, Marco, I'll let you kind of just do a quick intro, man, who you are, what you do, and all that stuff, and then we'll hop into some of the things that you're training for and have completed recently and dive into that stuff.
That works for me. My name is Marco Rosa. I'm a 32-year-old. I'm originally from Italy. I grew up in Rome, and now I live in Panama City, Florida. I'm a former Navy helicopter pilot, now software engineer, web developer, college student, because I'm still in school. And I'm also working on getting started programming training as a brand new certified coach with Endo3 Fitness.
Yeah, awesome, man. And that's just to brag on you a little bit, and I already did to the team, our internal team. So at the end of our certification, we have this culmination process where you take everything you've learned and you put it into a practical, and then you actually have to do some programming and submit it either for something you're training for, or we give you an athlete and you program out for that athlete. And Marco submitted probably one of the most flawless program implements I've seen in anyone submitting programming tests, and I just thought it was really impressive because I normally always have feedback, and when we hopped on that call after I'd reviewed it, I was like, I don't have a lot to say. That was awesome. So I just wanted to brag on you a little bit, man. That was really phenomenal, and just great work on that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm actually using that programming as my starting point, as a template.
Yeah, and that's perfect, man. So let's talk about the last couple months. We've spoken before as you training up to things, and also through the EO3 coaching program. But you finished recently Kokoro with Sealfit. Which first, can you explain what that is for anyone who may not know? And then after that, we'll kind of hop into training for it, what it was like during, all that stuff. But what is the actual event?
Sure. Okay, so Kokoro is a 50-hour, and what Sealfit calls it's a crucible event. So you go, and they keep you up for 50 hours straight, no sleeping. They feed you, obviously. And it's modeled after the Navy SEAL Hell Week. Obviously, we don't do the whole Hell Week, because Hell Week, I believe it's like 5 days or a whole week-long event. But they simulate it with 50 hours. And all the instructors that participate during the event, and they watch you and train you and destroy you pretty much, are all former Navy SEAL buds instructors, or current. We actually had one of the instructors that is still teaching the buds.
That's awesome,
and,
man.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-blowing. So
tell me, what would make you want to do something like that? 50 hours of simulated SEAL training. Why do it?
Why is the main question you have to answer to actually go and attend the event. Otherwise, your chances to succeed are very small. I can tell you that my personal reason for attending was a combination of multiple things. Especially as a brand new programming trainer, EO3 coach, certified coach, I wanted to go there to test my limits and lead by example. The farthest I can push my limits, the farthest I can push my body and my mental toughness, the better I can help others and train others and push others to their limits and beyond. And a second part of the reason why I wanted to attend the camp is because I missed my military life, style of living, my brotherhood within the military. And there are very, very few things, I believe, that you can do as a civilian that resemble that environment. And that gave me a chance to connect with other people that have the same mentality and the same way of thinking I do. And I mean, it definitely pushed my limits to a brand new standard.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, man. So during the event, 50 hours, I'm familiar with Sealfit. I've been through one of their 3-day programs, more of a watered down version of Kokoro. It was something they don't even do publicly. It was like for a bunch of entrepreneurs, and they put this camp on. Still very challenging on my end, but it wasn't like straight up Kokoro camp. And I do think that they are a very professional group out there. I said that when I recorded this, my kind of recap back several years ago on the Better Humanology podcast. I think the difference between Sealfit and GoRuck are just hugely different. I think GoRuck is a bunch of guys who want to, show off and like kind of haze people. And Sealfit, everything they do has a purpose and it's very professional, even though it's extremely challenging. And there is some of that, military stuff. But tell me, kind of during the event, what were some of the hardest evolutions for you?
The event is pretty long, and we started on the first day. They start you up with what they call the breakout. So that's a bunch of commands repeated one after the other in very fast sequence that you are going to screw up. They do it on purpose so that they make you do push-up, crunches, all sorts of different exercises. You work with what they call a weapon, which pretty much is a plastic pipe filled up with sand of about 10 pounds. They make you do all sorts of things with it. You're sitting in the mud. They spraying you with water with hoses and all sorts of things. And you start, and that's like 2 hours to 3 hours like that. Then you do the standards, so the PSD, what they call the PSD, sit-ups, pull-ups, push-ups, and air squats, and then the mile run. After that, they took us somewhere else on a hill. It was hot as hell. The asphalt was burning, and they make you do like hill sprints in the middle of the sun. Then you go back and you do Murph, and then
you just throw Murph in there.
Yeah, geez.
Yeah, right. And pretty much what they call surf torture, when you lock arms and you go in the water. But on top of that, I mean, they make you carry like sandbags on the beach, wet and sandy, and all sorts of things. Then you go back day 2. We got swimming done. We got a bunch of more evolutions done, a lot of rocking, a lot of walking in the sun, a lot of carrying loads. And second night was, for the most part, for a lot of people in the group, was the hardest part. We had to rock up Mount Palomar, which is about a 4,000 feet change in elevation. And we rocked about 12 miles total, so that's 6 up and 6 down. And I can tell you that coming down was harder than going up because the asphalt was not great, and you kept slipping down, and your feet were destroyed already after 2 days being in water, ice baths, and stuff like that. But I have to say that the training that I have done prior to the event prepared me extremely well for that evolution, so I didn't get destroyed too much. What killed me was the log PT.
Ah, yeah.
My God, that thing destroyed me, because when you are 6 guys, 5'2" to 5'5", and we had a 5'9" guy, a professional football athlete that was in our group, it becomes a little easier to carry a 300 to 400 pound log. But when you are in the range of 5'6" to 5'9", and you're carrying the same amount of load with the same number of people, it's heavier, much heavier with respect to the taller guys. And it just killed me. And that's one thing that I should have done better training. I should have worked with much, much heavier weights when I was doing overhead stuff.
Yeah, and to be honest, man, like that log PT, I did a lot of that when I was out at Sealfit. I've also done it in other evolutions just in the military. I don't know if there is prep for that, because it all comes down to your team. And then, like, if someone wants to be lazy, even for 10 seconds they want to be lazy, that's on you now. You're now taking a majority of their load. It is one of the best teamwork exercises in the world. And, I think it could show you a lot about the other people on the log. But in the end, it's a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we started with 28 people, and we finished 23, which is a very high number compared to the other camps, because this one was Kokoro 54 that I completed. Kokoro 53, they started in like 25, only 9 finished.
Wow.
Yeah, the instructors were all impressed that we all pulled all the way until the end, almost all of us. But we had the chance to connect prior to the event. Like, we created a Facebook group. We got on weekly calls on Saturday. We got to know each other. We got to know each other's weaknesses and when to push each other, when the other needed help, and all that kind of stuff. So we were already a cohesive group, and that made it a lot easier on us.
And so what did you run into any issues? You mentioned log PT. You wish you would have done a little more training overhead. But did you run into issues like nutritional stuff? Like, did you run out of fuel? Like, you just run out of energy? Was there anything you noticed? Because that's such a long event. It's really hard to stay on top of that, especially when you're not actually, in charge of it fully. Like, if you're in an evolution, they're not going to let you eat at that exact second. So, like, what was your strategy there?
What I did in training helped a lot. So I trained fasted the whole 1 year that I trained for the event, so that I was ready for it no matter what. Not fueled. I stayed on limited amount of waters because I didn't know when I was going to drink. So I prepared myself for it as much as possible. But during the event, I mean, they kept us with a 5-gallon jug of water next to us at all times and had us drink off of it multiple times with electrolytes in it. The food was constant. I mean, if you definitely needed fuel, they had it for you. They had electrolytes for you if you needed to. That was not the issue. What I discovered while training for this event is that once I reached a certain level of fatigue, I could keep that pretty much steady and be miserable, but at the same time not fall too much farther than that. So what I did is pretty much push myself and put out as much as possible at the beginning, reached that level, and just kept it at that point throughout the whole event, which is, I mean, it's still hard, but it made it a little easier, especially mentally for me, to keep going.
And did you do any sleep deprivation training before you went? Like, did you try any super early workouts or like midnight workouts or anything like that?
Yes, sir. My old training is done extremely early in the morning. Throughout the whole year of Kokoro, my alarm went off between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning, depending on the day, because I had about a 2-hour WOD each day for 5 days a week to do. And then during the weekends, I did my longer training stuff, up to 5 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours. And I did some sleep deprivation. I went and rocked for 5 hours from midnight until 5 o'clock in the morning. I did a full 24 hours event, with each hour had a different evolution in it of about 30 to 45 minutes each. And I mean, yeah, I worked on sleep deprivation. I worked on getting wet and sandy on the beach, running, rocking, and doing these things one after the other.
Yeah, it sounds like your training and preparation was perfect. And this is also, just kind of like zooming out. This is why I like training people, like from a coaching standpoint. I like training people for events like this, and also why I loved training military personnel, because all the things you just mentioned are the complete opposite of what a professional athlete. They're like, no. Make sure that you're getting like 12 hours of sleep every night. Be completely hydrated and as much food as possible to fuel. And that's all good if you want to be optimal. And I agree with those things. But when it comes to closer to game time, it's like, well, you need to know how your body operates in these, very adverse situations. And I think that a lot of people may not have prepared themselves for that. I think that, like I said, I think you did it perfectly. But if anyone's out there is listening to this thinking about doing a 12-hour event, a 24-hour event, you should probably start to get a feel for how your body is going to operate in that. Like I have this 100-mile bike race coming up. And it's the race, the pedaling for 100 miles is not the hard part. The hard part really is the heat. So I need to know how my body's going to operate in heat. If all I ever did was an air-conditioned bike, stationary bike at a gym to prepare for this, I would get crushed on game day, right? So it's all these little things that people don't think about that looks like you did perfectly. Was there anything that you wish you would have done or prepared for a little bit better?
Mainly what I said earlier about the working with heavier weights on the overhead for a better output on my log PT. And probably I should have done MARF in the middle of the day in Florida, 90 degrees, 80% humidity, more times. Because I've done a lot of MARFs when I was getting ready for this event. But because of my schedule, a lot of them were in the early mornings, during nights. Sleep deprived, yes, but I didn't train enough in the heat, and that's exactly what happened at camp. So that would have helped. But most of my longer evolutions were not programmed by me because I was not a professional programmer, and I'm not yet a professional programmer, but I did not have the knowledge that I gained with the EO3 coaching. That was toward the end of my preparation. So I had to hire a coach. And I mean, just like you said, if you're thinking about attending something of this sort, I would strongly suggest to get with a professional and get a schedule down and program it and schedule it properly, because Coach Jeff Grant with Hill Seekers, he was awesome, man. I mean, he pretty much pushed me beyond what I could do for myself, because once I reached 6 months of preparation and I was doing these long WODs every day, I felt that I reached like sort of plateau. So that's when I reached out to him, and he did a full interview with me before even saying, okay, I'll train you. And once he said yes, he started giving me workouts for the weekend, and I did some crazy stuff for those, but it definitely helped a lot.
That's awesome. All right, man. Well, I want to know now, kind of transitioning to what's next. You know, what are you preparing for next, and what are you doing?
Well, right now I'm in a transition state, going from that crazy training to a more quote-unquote normal kind of schedule. So I'm doing a lot of high-intensity interval training and a lot of trekking and rocking because of the trip that I got scheduled coming up in November that I'm going to be climbing a lot. And after that, I am hitching to get my hands on one of the EO3 tracks. I'm undecided in between three of them, but it all comes down to equipment and what I'm willing to buy and or travel around with, because unfortunately I live in the area that got hit by Hurricane Michael last October, and so I still haven't gotten back to my house and my lovely pull-up bar and all that kind of stuff. So I had to drag my equipment around to be able to train for Kokoro. It was not fun. So right now I'm just sticking to everything that I can do, no gear. But after the trip in November, when I'm hopefully back in the house and more settled in, I definitely want to get some new equipment, some new stuff, and get on either the one-man series, shred, or the no gear. I haven't decided yet.
That's awesome, man. And what mountain are you going to be fumbling around on in September?
Yeah, we're going for Everest. I mean, it's gonna kill me. It's gonna kill me that we're going just to base camp, because I know that I'm gonna get there and I'm gonna look and wanting to go up all the way. But it was not in the cards for this trip, and I'm not going by myself or with a group of people or athletes that would be willing to do such a crucible. But it's a group of friends. We're trekking to Everest Base Camp. It's about 19,000 feet up, and it's going to take us 5 days to go up, 5 days to come down.
Isn't that crazy? It's like that's a significant elevation, and then like the peak of Everest is even higher than that. It's just insane. It's like and that is going to be amazing journey. And how are you preparing for a 19,000 foot climb?
Altitude wise, there's really not much I can do in Florida.
Right. Now Joe just experienced that.
Yeah, altitude is terrible.
Yeah, can't do
You're not
much
used
about
to it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, my girlfriend had some problems with that in Peru when she visited Machu Picchu. So we are gearing up with some altitude sickness pills and trekking as much as we can with as much load as we can. And like I said, keeping the heart rate as high as possible with high intensity interval training. And Jerred, you'll be proud of this. She's actually following one of my programming schedule right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and getting her ready. Well, we'll have to get an update to have you back on. Get an update on how you did it and how the mountain climb went. But man, I think that's it. I do want to like end on a few of the typical questions we always ask any athlete who comes on the podcast. So I'll start with the first one. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
You know how like people like David Goggins or Jocko Wheeling and Mark Devine always talk about being comfortable, being uncomfortable?
Yes.
That's it. That's, in my opinion, the best way to begin developing and increasing mental toughness. So do something you don't want to do or you don't like to do and get comfortable doing that. Even if it's, I mean, it doesn't have to be a long event or anything like that. Even if it's doing the dishes. You don't want to do the dishes. You don't like doing the dishes. Do the dishes.
I 1,000% agree with that one. All right, now, if you can only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, Joey's going to like this one. I like rings and TRX.
Nice.
Awesome.
Get some love.
Joe, did you want to slip in your question you normally ask?
I don't know if I can, because, I mean, he needs to get back to his gym first.
He needs to get his house unhurricaned or what?
Yeah, that'll be the goal.
All right, man. So what is, your best advice for all the garage gym athletes out there listening to this right now?
The best advice that I can give to all garage gym athlete out there, it would be stop listening to the BS and the excuses. Push yourself. Sign up for that event you have been dreaming and or wondering about for months. Try the new training program that you don't think you can complete. Get uncomfortable and never stop looking for that next challenge, because, I mean, that's the only way you can grow and live a full life without regrets.
Dude, I love it. And, it's just that when I wrote an article a long time ago about mental benchmarking, and it's like, you push out this threshold every time you do an event. Every time you push yourself a little bit harder, you now have a new benchmark that your brain is aware of. So you just, by doing Kokoro and then climbing a large portion of Everest later in this year, you've pushed your mental benchmark out so far that now when you're doing a normal workout, it's just like there's no squabble, there's nothing about it. You're just like, I'm gonna get after this. And I think that's a big part of what you're saying, and why I completely agree, is that mental benchmarking is so important in training and in life.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, Marco, thanks for your time, man, and thanks for joining us on this episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man.
All right, guys. Always good to hear from our athletes. Really cool to hear Marco's story, his journey so far. If any of you are doing something cool or would like to be highlighted, or just think that you could, contribute some awesome stuff that other Garage Gym athletes would benefit from, don't hesitate to reach out to us. However you want to do that, Instagram, Facebook, emails. We do seasons where we interview our athletes. If you want to be on the podcast, let us know. Or if you want to hop in a show like we just did, let us know that as well. But now we're going to talk about the Meet Yourself Saturday workout, and I'm going to hand that over to Joe because he is actually the one who programmed it.
Yeah, so for this one, I randomly did this one Saturday. In the spring, we were doing a ton of rowing intervals of 1,000, 1,200 meters, and 1,500 meters, which were terrible in their own right because you're not really resting too much in between. So one day I decided I wanted to keep doing them because I did notice it was improving my rowing. I also had just happened to see a sale on one of the marketplaces, and I got some heavy slam balls, 40 pound and 60 pound. So I was like, okay, I want to do some of this rowing still, but I really need to use these balls, and I really wanted to, use what I got. So I did the rowing, and then I would do a bunch of just ground to shoulder and slams and stuff in between, and then go back to rowing and just kind of did that back and forth for a while. And I was like, what if this was just combined into a workout? And then I tried to think of a name for it. So I came up with Riverboat Heist because I thought, if you're going to heist a riverboat, you're going to row out to it, and then you're going to heft all the weight of your packs of gold, and then you're going to row away from it. And yeah, that makes total sense.
Hey, if you programmed it, you get to name it. That's like rule number one. So
yeah,
I probably would have just called it the Confused 5K, which isn't as creative as since we just had one, with the 2K. All right, so what are you've actually done it then, right?
Not with like the cap, but I've more or less done it.
Okay, so
it's not as fast.
Okay, so I guess you can tip strategies, workout.
Well, so I didn't lay out the full workout yet, but it's 5 rounds with a 33-minute cap. So for the 5 rounds, you're going to row or run 1K, and then you're going to accumulate 1,000 pounds with a ground to shoulder movement. So whatever the heavy ball you have, so this is using a slam ball, a wall ball, sandbag, you're going from ground to shoulder, accumulating 1,000 pounds. So I guess at 40 pounds, that would be 25 reps in between these. If you don't have a ball, then we said that you can use a plate. So like hold a plate with 2 hands, tap it on the ground, and then you're picking it up to just above head level. So you can put it over your head, but just enough of that, and then back down, tap it on the ground, and then up again. So 1K row, 1,000 pounds of whatever the ground to shoulder is. So you can go heavier for less reps, lighter for more reps, and then back on the rower, 5 rounds, 33-minute cap. As far as tips, it's kind of similar to the Confused 2K. Like you want to row fast, but not like kill yourself fast because you still have to get up and do the ground to shoulder. However, ground to shoulder, you should be able to you should try and do almost as fast as you want or can. Using the ball, they're sometimes a little time consuming because you're ground to shoulder and you turn it around, slamming the ball or putting the ball back on the ground, then picking it up. I'd also probably go heavier. I'd probably use my 60, but who knows? I mean, you'd have to really play with it ahead of time, see what you feel comfortable doing 20, 30 reps of, or whatever you need.
Yeah, so my tips would be do that math ahead of time. Yeah, find out what it was, but do the math ahead of time. Obviously, I don't want anybody to ask me how am I supposed to keep track of the math every time I lift it. No, just do that ahead of time. So find out what you're going to lift and what you think you can handle. And I do... So with the Confused 2K, while they are somewhat similar, there is a little bit of strategy in the rowing there because you want to keep a pace where you don't have to hold something as long. Now this one is more like if you don't finish, it's kind of like more like the Hard to Kill 5 mile. If you don't finish, you're dead. You don't succeed. You do not finish or complete the workout. Yeah. It's not like when we say capped in these type of workouts. If you get capped, you failed the workout. And so better luck next time. Same with like Condition Me to the Grave. That's why I like putting these caps on there. And we tried to make the cap to where it would be very challenging if you were running. and rowing. So it's like if you're rowing, you're probably going to squeeze in under the time cap if you're not jacking around with your repetitions, your ground to shoulder. Mm-hmm. If you do this workout running and you make it under the time cap, I think that's going to be a little bit more challenging and a little bit more of a meet yourself Saturday. Because I don't know what the percentage would be, but from athletes we've had on the podcast, I don't know. What do you think? We're batting at maybe 20, 25% actually having a rower, maybe more, maybe 30%. Yeah. So a lot of people are going to be running this workout, and it's going to be challenging. But the time cap remains. Everything's still 1-to-1. And if you feel like the rowing one, if you finish up this Meet Yourself Saturday and you get well under the time cap and you rowed and you're like, that wasn't too hard, well, then my recommendation is just do it again running, like right after. Just take a 5-minute break and then do it again right after. And then let me know if you meet the time cap again. That's my my added challenge there.
Yeah, per round to make the cap would be 6.5 minutes. So that gives you 4 minutes for the row and then 2.5 for the ball. So breaking it down to that also might help for some people, see what they need to work with.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it. It's going to be fun. All right, that's all I got, man. You got anything else?
Not for the workout.
All right, so this podcast brought to you by your awesomeness, Garage Gym Athlete. Joe, why should everyone sign up for a 14-day free trial?
Group suffering.
Not
just for our own workouts, but like we mentioned the events that we're going to be doing later on, and like whenever we do events in the area. So the North Carolina Spartan, just come out and join us to do those things as well. Even if you have we want to do the race, and so that you can join our training and then join our people on the at the things.
Yeah, and anyone thinking about doing one of these events or joining us, we're going to try and get some people there, but there's immediately 5 people who are committed to doing it. And then there's 15 people or more who immediately are like, I'll give you a maybe. And, whatever, it might happen. Just do it. Just do the event. You are not going to regret it later on, having gone and done something and pushed yourself. I've never gone to one of these events and been like, damn, I really wish I didn't do that. You can... And that's with jacking up my hip flexor I mentioned, ripping my hand apart on another one. I always still have a good time and get something out of it. And it's always fun to, like you said, suffer as a group. So it'll be a good time. Join us for the events. If you're one of those people, you're like, I'm on the fence. Get off the fence. Join us. Let's do it. All right. Till next week.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.